6 years. For 6 years after writing The Ugly Duckling, Hans Christian Andersen refused to write another fairy tale. From November 1843 until late 1849, the man who had become synonymous with the form, who had just produced what he himself called the story of my life, went silent. He wrote travelogues, novels, poems, but not a single story for children. This isn't a case of writer's block. It was a deliberate, extended withdrawal from the very genre that gave him his global reputation. The number itself is odd, 6 years. It's an oddly specific pause, a quiet protest lodged in his own bibliography. Something about that story, about its creation and its immediate, overwhelming success, seems to have exhausted him, or perhaps something about its reception made him feel profoundly misunderstood. He gave the world what he believed to be his autobiography, and the world read it as a sweet, generic fable about belonging. The silence that followed feels less like satisfaction and more like a retreat. We are going to conduct a kind of synchronized reading. On one side, the text of The Ugly Duckling, specifically the 1843 original Danish version. On the other, the documented life of its author, Hans Christian Andersen. We are not looking for simple one-to-one allegories. That's too easy, and Andersen was more complex than that. Instead, we are tracing two timelines that run parallel, looking for the moments where the psychic pressure of the life seems to deform the narrative of the story, where a personal memory forces a choice of words, where a lifelong humiliation dictates a plot point. This process is less about decoding and more about listening for echoes. The story we have inherited, the one on greeting cards and in animated films, is a smooth, clean thing, a story of transformation. The life was anything but, and the original text is far closer to the life. The sanitized popular version, in its attempt to offer simple comfort, accidentally performs a remarkable service. It throws the original's bleakness into much sharper relief. The very things it smooths over are the jagged edges where the real account is located. Let's begin where he did. The egg. The duckling is born from a misplaced egg, an anomaly from the start. It was so big and ugly, the other ducks say immediately. He is judged on his appearance before he has even taken a step. He is an intruder, a genetic error in a closed system. His crime is his physicality. Now, look at Andersen, born 1805 in Odense, the son of a shoemaker and a washerwoman. He was, by all contemporary accounts, a strange-looking child, tall, gangly, with a large nose and small eyes, and feet so big a local poet mockingly called him the stork. He was an object of ridicule from his earliest years, not for his actions, but for the body he inhabited. Biographer Jackie Wollschlager, in her definitive work on Andersen, describes how other children would taunt him, pulling at his long limbs, mocking his high-pitched voice. He wasn't just poor, he was physically dissonant in his environment. Like the duckling, his otherness was written on his body from birth. It was not a chosen identity, it was a sentence. The first ordeal for the duckling is the farmyard. It's a complete social world, with its own hierarchies, its own rules of inclusion and exclusion, and it is relentlessly violent. He was bitten, pushed, and made fun of by both the ducks and the hens, Andersen writes. The turkey cock, who had been born with spurs and therefore thought himself an emperor, puffed himself up like a ship in full sail and went right up to him and gobbled and grew quite red in the face. This isn't cartoonish squabbling, it's a detailed anatomy of bullying. The turkey cock's aggression is rooted in his own sense of innate superiority. He attacks because he can. The duckling's response is purely passive. He endures, he suffers, he has no recourse. Now, shift the scale. Look at Andersen at 14, arriving alone in Copenhagen with a handful of coins. He is seeking patronage, a way into the royal theatre. He is the farmyard duckling entering the domain of the turkey cocks. He presents himself to the city's cultural elite, directors, singers, dancers, and he is met with universal derision. One director tells him he's too thin. A ballerina mocks his awkwardness. He sings for the famous composer Christoph Weiss, who takes pity on him for a short time before passing him off. For 3 years, he is a charity case, living on the edge of starvation, passed from one patron to another, enduring what he later described in his diary as indescribable suffering. He was bitten and pushed and made fun of. The Copenhagen elite, like the turkey cock, saw a boy born without spurs and found him contemptible. His ambition was an affront, his poverty, his accent, his face. They were all evidence of his unworthiness. This brings us to a critical divergence between the text and its popular interpretation. The common reading is that the duckling is an outcast because he hasn't found his true family yet. It's a story about finding where you belong. But Andersen's original text suggests something more severe. The farmyard is not just the wrong place. It is a microcosm of the entire world. The cruelty is not situational, it is universal. After fleeing the farmyard, the duckling encounters wild ducks. They don't attack him, they tolerate him, with a crucial condition. "You are really ugly," they say. "But that is of no consequence to us, so long as you do not marry into our family." Here, the logic of social rejection is made explicit. Otherness is permissible at a distance. It is tolerable as long as it does not attempt to integrate, to claim equal status, to mix its bloodline. Consider Andersen's relationship with the Collin family. Jonas Collin, a powerful state councillor, became Andersen's reluctant patron. He secured the boy a place at a grammar school, effectively saving him from poverty. But Andersen was never, ever treated as a son. He was a project. He lived in the Collin household as a perpetual outsider, a strange bird they had taken in. He fell desperately in love with 2 of the Collin children, Edvard and Louise, but his affections were a source of embarrassment. Edvard Collin, in his later writings, was clear about the dynamic. He admired Andersen's talent, but was repulsed by his sentimentality, his social awkwardness, his constant need for validation. The Collins were the wild ducks. They would shelter him, they would support his career, but he could not marry into their family. The social and class gulf was absolute. His ugliness, his low birth, was of no consequence as long as he remembered his place. Every time he forgot it, he was punished with coldness and condescension. The story's pacing now becomes a series of short, brutal episodes, a relentless accumulation of trauma. The duckling is shot at by hunters. He is terrified by a dog that spares him only because he is too wretched to eat. He finds temporary shelter in a peasant's hut, but here he encounters a new kind of torment, the tyranny of prescribed function. The hen and the cat who live there constantly question his purpose. "Can you lay eggs?" asks the hen. "Can you arch your back and purr and give out sparks?" asks the cat. Because he can do neither, they declare his opinions invalid. He speaks of a desire to float on the water, to feel the sun, and they dismiss it as foolishness. "You have nothing to do. That is why you have these fancies," the hen tells him. His nature is incomprehensible to them, so they label it a defect. This is a direct transcription of Andersen's experience at the Slagels Grammar School. Jonas Collin sent him there under the charge of headmaster Simon Meisling to finally receive a proper education. Meisling was a sadist. For 5 years, he systematically humiliated Andersen. He mocked his creative writing, calling it drivel. He ridiculed his appearance. He told him he would die in the poorhouse. Meisling was the cat and the hen. He was trying to force Andersen into a shape he found acceptable. The school was designed to teach Latin and Greek, to produce civil servants. It was not designed for a burgeoning poet. Andersen's desire to write, his fancies, were treated as a symptom of laziness, a distraction from the proper work of parsing verbs. As the scholar Jens Andersen, no relation, notes in his biography, Maesling's goal was to break his spirit. The headmaster could not comprehend Andersen's intrinsic nature, so he tried to beat it out of him. The Duckling's quiet statement, "You do not understand me," is the core of Andersen's defense against Maesling. It is the plea of an artist trapped in a utilitarian system. Let's pause on that phrase. "I de forstår mig ikke." You do not understand me. It's one of the most important lines in the story, and it marks a turning point. The Duckling does not argue. He does not try to explain himself. He simply states a fact and leaves. This is not the act of a victim seeking validation. It is the quiet withdrawal of someone who has realized that communication is impossible. He is leaving the world of hens and cats, the world of prescribed utility, to face the unknown. This reflects a profound shift in Andersen's own psychology. After the trauma of the Maesling years, he developed a kind of dual identity. In public, he was increasingly ambitious and socially needy. But in his private diaries and letters, there is a growing sense of a secret, superior self that others could not touch or comprehend. He began to believe his genius was so profound that ordinary people, the hens and cats of the world, were simply not equipped to recognize it. The narrative then shifts into its darkest phase. The winter. The Duckling is alone. The landscape is frozen and hostile. Andersen's description is visceral. He had to swim about continually to keep the space from freezing up. At last, he became exhausted and lay quite still, and was frozen fast in the ice. This is the point of near death. It is the culmination of every rejection, every act of violence, every misunderstanding. He has been driven from every society he has tried to enter, and now nature itself is trying to kill him. He is saved by a peasant, but only temporarily. He is so terrified of the peasant's children that he flees again, back into the desolate winter. The suffering is not a single event, it is a state of being. This period maps onto the bleakest years of Andersen's early adulthood. After leaving Maesling's school, he was adrift. His first books were met with critical savagery. The most influential critic of the day, Johann Ludwig Heiberg, dismissed his work as clumsy and sentimental. Other critics attacked his grammar, his low-born origins, his very right to be writing at all. This was his winter. He was creatively and emotionally frozen in the ice of Copenhagen's literary scene. He wrote in his diary of profound loneliness, of suicidal thoughts. He felt, as he wrote to a friend in 1833, trampled under the feet of men. The near death of the Duckling in the ice is not melodrama, it is a faithful rendering of Andersen's own despair. During a period when it seemed every door was closed to him, the world was telling him, in no uncertain terms, that he should not exist. And then the spring comes, the sun shines, the larks sing. The Duckling feels a new strength in his wings. He flies, and he sees 3 beautiful swans. He is filled with a strange longing. He decides to fly to them, fully expecting to be killed. I will fly to them, to the royal birds, he thinks, and they will kill me, because I, who am so ugly, dare to approach them. But it is better to be killed by them than to be bitten by the ducks, pushed by the hens, kicked by the girl who feeds the poultry, or to suffer hunger in winter. This is a crucial psychological moment. He is not seeking acceptance. He is choosing a better class of death. He is actively seeking annihilation at the hands of something beautiful rather than endure the petty, meaningless cruelty of the farmyard. This is an act of suicidal despair, not of hope. This moment of choosing a noble death has a startling parallel in Andersen's life. In 1833, after a series of brutal reviews and personal rejections, he used a small travel grant to flee Denmark for Italy. He was convinced his career was over. His letters from this period are filled with a sense of finality. He was going south, he felt, to see beauty one last time before fading into obscurity. Italy, for him, was the domain of the royal birds, the land of Goethe, of classical art, of true aesthetic genius. He was flying toward the heart of the European culture that had, until then, defined itself by excluding people like him. He did not expect to be welcomed, he expected to be overwhelmed, to be confirmed in his own insignificance. He was, like the duckling, choosing to be destroyed by something magnificent. Now we arrive at the story's climax, the moment that has been so thoroughly misunderstood. The duckling bows his head, awaiting death, and he sees his own reflection in the water. He is no longer a clumsy, ugly grey bird. He is a swan. The other swans swim to him, stroking him with their beaks. A child says, "There is a new one," and he is the most beautiful of all. He is overcome with happiness. But listen carefully to what he thinks. He does not think, "I have become beautiful." He thinks, "I never dreamed of so much happiness when I was the ugly duckling." He is not celebrating a transformation. He is acknowledging a continuity of self. He was always a swan. The suffering did not change him. The suffering did not make him grow into a swan. It was simply the experience of a swan being raised by ducks. This is the core of Andersen's personal mythology, and it is the absolute opposite of a story of self-improvement. The story is a ferocious argument for genetic determinism. It is a statement that nobility is innate, that genius is in the blood, and that the world of ducks and hens is constitutionally incapable of recognizing it. The duckling doesn't learn a lesson. He doesn't grow as a person. He doesn't become a better version of himself. He simply endures abuse until his true, predetermined nature is revealed to him. He survived. That was his only accomplishment. The scholar and translator Tina Nunnally points out that the original Danish phrase for ugly duckling is grim elling. Grim doesn't just mean ugly, it carries connotations of cruelty, severity, and harshness. He wasn't just unsightly, he was a grim thing, a creature defined by the grimness of his experience. Andersen believed he was a genius. From a very early age, he also harboured a lifelong, unsubstantiated belief that he was the illegitimate son of royalty. He wasn't arguing that a poor boy from Odense could become a great artist. He was arguing that he was a great artist, a swan, who had, by a cruel accident of fate, been born into a shoemaker's hovel. His entire life was the experience of a swan being raised by ducks. His time with the Collins, his torture under Meisling, his rejection by critics, all of it was the pecking and biting of lesser creatures who could not recognise his innate nobility. The story is not an inspirational tale for outsiders. It is an act of aristocratic self-assertion. It says, "I was never one of you. I was better than you from the moment I was born. Your cruelty was a product of your ignorance." It is a story of vindication, not of acceptance. This is where the popular, sanitized version becomes so revealing. By emphasizing that ugly duckling becomes a beautiful swan narrative, it introduces the idea of transformation. It turns the story into a gentle fable about puberty, about awkward phases, about blooming late. It imposes a modern, therapeutic arc onto a story that was originally a raw statement of class and genetic pride. This cheerful misreading is an attempt to make the story palatable, to turn it into a universal comfort. But in doing so, it exposes the brutal core of the original. The comfort we add to the story is the very thing Andersen refused to include. The original text offers no hope for the ducks. They don't learn to be more tolerant. They are just left behind, Forgotten in their muddy, ignorant farmyard, the swan flies away and does not look back. There is no reconciliation, no forgiveness. Think about the final lines. The swan is overwhelmed. He did not know what to do. He was too happy, but he was not at all proud, for a good heart is never proud. This line feels strange, dissonant. After a story built entirely on the premise of innate superiority, this sudden injection of humility seems tacked on, a concession to conventional morality. Some critics, like the Danish scholar Johan Demelius, see this as Andersen the Christian attempting to temper the almost Nietzschean pride of his personal myth. But it feels unconvincing. The entire narrative engine is one of pride, of a secret knowledge of one's own worth in the face of universal contempt. The duckling's final happiness is not about joining a community. It's about having his superiority finally ratified by his peers. He is happy, not because he is loved, but because he is recognized. Andersen's own life followed this exact pattern. When his work finally began to achieve international fame, especially in Germany and England, he did not feel humbled. He felt vindicated. He saw it as the world finally catching up to the truth he had always known. He would meticulously collect and scrapbook his positive reviews. He was obsessed with his fame, with the honours bestowed upon him. He was the swan, finally among swans, and he revelled in it. The happiness he describes in the story is the happiness of a man whose private, grandiose self-concept has finally been validated by the external world. He wasn't proud. Andersen's diaries are a monument to artistic pride, insecurity, and an insatiable need for applause. The ending of the story is the ending he craved his entire life. Not just success, but a success so total it retroactively justifies all the suffering. It proves the farmyard was wrong. Let's shift the scale again, this time outward. Why has this story, in its altered form, become one of the most persistent fables in the world? Because the sanitized version tells a lie we desperately want to believe, that suffering is productive, that it builds character, that the ugly duckling becomes a swan through its trials. This is a comforting, progressive, Protestant work ethic narrative. It domesticates the story's radical, uncomfortable message. The original story says something far more unsettling. It says suffering is just suffering. It is a meaningless torment inflicted by the ignorant upon the noble. It does not make you better. You just have to survive it. Your worth is not determined by your struggle or your growth. It is a fixed intrinsic quality you either have or you don't. This is the accidental revelation performed by the adaptation. The cheerful version is a story about becoming. The original is a story about being. The distance between those two ideas is immense. The popular version is democratic. Anyone can be a swan if they just endure. The original is deeply aristocratic. You are either born a swan or you are not. And if you are not, you are doomed to the farmyard forever. The adaptation, by trying to make the story kind, illuminates the profound unkindness of Andersen's vision. It's a vision forged in the rigid class structure of 19th century Denmark, a world where social mobility was almost non-existent. Andersen didn't see himself as someone who climbed the social ladder. He saw himself as someone who was returned to his rightful station. So what about those 6 years of silence? Perhaps after writing The Ugly Duckling, he felt there was nothing more to say. He had written his own gospel, the foundational myth of his life. He had laid out his suffering and his vindication in a form so perfect, so potent, that it was immediately embraced by the world. But the world embraced it for all the wrong reasons. They saw a story about an everyman, an outcast who makes good. He had written a story about his own unique, innate genius, and they had universalized it, turned it into a platitude. The global success of The Ugly Duckling was perhaps his greatest, most ironic failure of communication. He had shown them his soul, and they had admired it as a charming knick-knack. The silence might have been the response of a man who has just screamed his life story into a crowd and been met with polite applause for a clever performance. The pieces start to connect, don't they? The awkward boy in Odense, the humiliated supplicant in Copenhagen, the tormented student in Slagelse, the perpetual outsider in the Collin household. Each one is a station in the Duckling's painful journey. The story is not an allegory in which each character stands for someone. It's more like a series of emotional photographs. Andersen is not just the duckling. He is the duckling enduring the hens. He is the duckling fleeing the hunters. He is the duckling freezing in the ice. He is the duckling seeing his reflection for the first time. He filtered his most painful memories through this simple narrative structure, and in doing so, gave them a shape and a purpose. The purpose was to prove that he was right all along. This is a difficult thing to accept because it strips a beloved story of its comfort. It forces us to see it not as a gentle fable, but as a deeply bitter and self-aggrandizing piece of personal myth-making. It's a work of profound artistic genius, but its human message is stark and unforgiving. It has more in common with a revenge fantasy than a children's story. The ultimate revenge on the farmyard is not to reform it, but to leave it so far behind that it ceases to matter. The swan doesn't even have to announce its triumph to the ducks. Its very existence as a swan is the triumph. This reading also explains the story's strange lack of interiority for the main character. We see the duckling suffer, but we rarely hear his thoughts. He is mostly a passive object, a thing to which bad things happen. His agency is limited to fleeing. This makes sense if the story is not about personal growth. A character on a journey of growth must have an inner life, must reflect and change. But the duckling's identity is fixed. He is a swan. His inner life is irrelevant because his essence is predetermined. His only job is to survive long enough for his body to catch up with his soul. This passivity is a direct reflection of Andersen's own feelings of helplessness during his youth. He felt that his life was something happening to him, an ordeal to be endured until his true self could be revealed. Let's return to the text itself for a moment, to a specific word choice. When the swans accept him, they strø ham med næbberne. The classic English translation is that they caressed him with their beaks. But strøg is a more neutral term. It means to stroke, to smooth. It's a gesture of grooming, of recognition, of placid acceptance among equals. It is not an emotional outpouring, it is a quiet confirmation. He is one of them. The understated nature of this welcome is telling. For Andersen, the ultimate dream was not to be showered with affection, but to be calmly and factually recognized by the people he considered his peers. It was to have his membership in the club of genius stamped and approved without fuss. The story, then, is a machine for reinterpreting the past. It takes a history of abuse, neglect, and humiliation and reframes it as a necessary, if brutal, prelude to a predetermined triumph. It doesn't heal the wounds, it justifies them. It says that all that pain was the price of being a swan in a world of ducks. This is a powerful and seductive idea for anyone who has ever felt like an outsider, but it's also a dangerous one. It encourages a belief in one's own secret superiority, and it dismisses the cruelty of others as mere ignorance. It bypasses the difficult work of empathy and forgiveness in favour of a transcendent, solitary victory. What we are left with is two different stories that share the same title. One is a piece of cultural folklore, a comforting narrative about personal transformation that we tell our children. It is a story about hope. The other is the text Hans Christian Andersen actually wrote, a story about innate identity, genetic destiny, and the vindication of the superior individual. It is a story, ultimately, about pride. The first story is a lie, but perhaps a useful one. The second is a stark and uncomfortable truth, a window into the mind of a man who survived the world by convincing himself he was never really a part of it. The pattern becomes clear. The story isn't a story, it's a personal inventory of injuries, catalogued and reordered into a narrative of inevitable victory. Each scene of persecution in the text corresponds to a documented period of humiliation in the life. The farmyard is the social world of Copenhagen. The hen and the cat are the utilitarian mindset of his headmaster, Simon Meisling. The winter is the brutal reception from the Danish literary critics. The swans are the international artistic elite who would eventually celebrate him. It's a map of his own life, drawn so that all roads lead to the conclusion he wanted, that he was a royal bird, unjustly tormented by lesser creatures. Andersen wrote in his diary on the day he finished the manuscript, "The tale will be translated, and it has taken a part of my own life." This is as close to a direct confession as we are ever likely to get. He knew precisely what he had done. He had taken the raw material of his own suffering and constructed a permanent monument to his own survival and perceived superiority. The story's power comes from the authenticity of the pain it describes. The duckling's torment feels real because it was real. Andersen just left out the part of the story where the swan, once recognised, remains a deeply insecure, needy, and often difficult man for the rest of his life. The fairy tale ends at the moment of triumph. The life, of course, had to continue. So when we return to that first edition from 1843, what are we holding? It's not just a children's book, it's a piece of evidence, it's a survivor's testimony, coded into a fable. It's a bitter, beautiful, and deeply self-serving argument that one's birth, one's essential nature, is the only thing that matters. It rejects the very idea of becoming in favour of the stark reality of being. The ugly duckling does not transform, he is revealed. And in that distinction lies the entire uncomfortable truth of Hans Christian Andersen's story. It was never about a duck. It was about a man who spent his life trying to prove he was a swan, mostly to himself.